Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everyone. It's welcome to another Java Code Camp. And in this occasion, we are going to continue in our series about Docker and how we can use it to simplify our development, even in our local environments. And in today's session, what we're going to be looking at is something called Docker Compose. So if you don't know me yet, my name is Matias, Mati. Everyone calls me Mati. I'm a subject matter expert. I've been with Globant 11 years, and my background is in scalable platforms, backend microservices. I've worked in multiple industries like gaming, banking, and so on. And it is also one of my passions to learn about technology and also to be able to teach about it. So I wanted to share with all of you now about Docker and how you can use it in your own development and in your projects and so on. So welcome everyone to this new Globant Java Code Camp. I'm going to start now today's session, and we're going to be talking about Docker Compose. So, what is Docker Compose? Docker Compose is a tool that allows defining and running multi-container applications using YML files. And it simplifies the management of containerized services. So in last session, last Wednesday, we saw and we learned about Docker and what a container is and so on. And we learned about Docker files and images and so on and so on. But now we, let's say we want to run multiple images because usually when we have a web application, it's not a single component that we will use. We have multiple applications, right? So multiple parts or components of the systems. For example, if we have a Spring Boot application, maybe we will have a backend part of the application, then we will have, for example, a database, then we will have also, maybe we'll have a cache like Redis, or we'll have a message broker like RabbitMQ or Apache Kafka. So depending on what we're going to do, or depending what we want to do, maybe our project will have multiple components, and sometimes we want to run those components all together, and we can and be able to start all of those components and easily stop them, and maybe switching between versions of components very easily. Because if let's say, and let's just talk about why we would use Docker Compose, and then we'll clarify more about these advantages as we see in our tutorial. As I explain the tutorial, it will be clear for you why you can use Docker Compose for these kind of things. So the first reason I would use it is because it simplifies development. So I can define multiple containers, like I was saying, MySQL or RabbitMQ and so on, and in a single command. So by just having everything defined in a single command, I can start all the containers I want and then stop all the containers I want as well. Also, it provides service isolation. So because each container runs as a separate machine, let's say, it gives me isolation. And let's say, for example, that I have multiple Spring Boot applications. Usually, Spring Boot applications are configured to run in the port 8080, right? And because you want to run, let's say, 2 or 3 Spring Boot applications in the same laptop or in the same server, you would need to have different ports assigned to the, so you'll have to change the configuration, right? But if we use Docker, those Spring Boot applications can all run in the port 8080 without any configuration change, because they run in different containers, which are different lightweight virtual machines. And then we can map them to different ports to test. But we don't, but they effectively, we haven't done any configuration change. And that is a good thing. Then it's easy to configure. The YML files for Docker Compose are very easy to understand. And we'll see how that is the case. And also, Docker Compose files can be versioned and controlled and enabled for easy collaboration. So you can have multiple different components, and then you want to change components, you can modify your Docker Compose, and that will provide you a way to collaborate with different people. So if you change the components for your stack, everyone can know that there was a change in the components. And then dependency management as well. It's very good for dependency management, because you can declare dependencies between the different containers, and services will so you can start different containers once the containers that are dependent on are started. So it's really, really useful. All right, so let's go straight into our tutorial application. So we'll have a Spring Boot application again, and in this case it's like a bank. Oops, sorry. So it's like a bank transaction that we will have, and we will read transactions from a Kafka topic, and these transactions will be processed here in a Kafka listener, and we will write those transactions in the database, and also we will create the account balance. So we will track the account balance so that everything is running properly, and then we will have a REST API to consume these account balances and the transactions. So we're going to be creating, well, the application will be already there. So this application is already created for us. I have already done that, and I'm going to share with you the code repository, which is here. I'm going to share it on the chat window, and be sure, if you want to follow along, be sure to switch to the initial branch. There is a master branch, and then there is an initial branch. Use initial branch if you want to follow along the tutorial. The master branch has the tutorial already solved, so that's why you should follow the initial one. So I'm going to walk you through the code very quickly, right? So I have the code right here, and I'm going to be browsing the code. So we have model classes. We have the transaction class, which has an ID, it has an account number, an amount, currency, the type of the transaction, whether it's a deposit or a withdrawal, status, and let me know if you were able to get the link in the comments. If you want, you can let me know. You can ask questions as well, always. So we have all this, right? And then we have an account balance as well, which has a big decimal for the balance, and then same account number and the currency and the last time it was updated. Okay, so we have these two things. And then we have repositories for these things. We created these repositories with Spring Data. So this is very standard for Spring Boot applications. And I hope you know how to create this, but if you don't, it's really simple. It's just creating interfaces and declaring new methods on the interfaces, and Spring will implement those methods automatically. Then we have the account controller, where we consume with a REST API the account balances and the transactions. And then we have our Kafka listener. So the Kafka listener is configured. So we have a Kafka config here as well. And this listener has the logic to save a transaction in the transaction repository, which connects to a database. And then it has a logic to find the account balance and then to process the transaction. So this is a method that increases the account balance if it was a deposit or a transfer, or it will it will reduce the balance if there is a if there is a withdrawal, it will reduce it. And then we update the last updated time, and finally we return the new account balance. So very simple. Oops. And then we save the new account balance in the database, and that's all. So this will update the account balance. So what I said here is that we will need a Kafka running in our local and a MySQL running into my local. So there is a question there. It says, "Hello Mati, can you share the repo, please?" I've already shared it. It's one of the it's my comment there. I don't know if you saw it. I can share it again. Let's see if I can share it again. There we go. All right. So we were talking about we have Kafka and we have MySQL. So in a normal scenario, I would need to install these things in my laptop if I want to run this whole thing. Okay. If I want to run this Spring Boot application, I would need to run Kafka, and I would need to run a MySQL instance, and all to run this application. So how can I do that? How can I run this application? And I would need to install it. I would need to install Kafka. I would need to install MySQL. So I would go to the Kafka website here and say, download Apache Kafka, and do a whole lot of things to download it and install it and so on. And the same I would do with MySQL. And then I will have those versions of MySQL and Apache Kafka in my laptop. So if I need a new version, then I will have to go and fetch the new version or upgrade it somehow, which is always a big problem. So instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Docker Compose to run these two containers, these two things in two containers, so that I don't have to install it in my local environment. So to do that, I'm going to go in here in my top directory, and I'll create a file called docker compose.yml. Okay, so now I have a Docker Compose file. So we'll start here by telling which version of Docker Compose are we using. We're going to be using version 2. And now we are going to be declaring the services that we're going to be running. The first service we're going to be running is Kafka. So I'm going to call it broker because it's a message broker. And I'm going to declare here the image. So the image is Confluent. So spelled like I'm going to copy it, but the image is spelled like this. So this is an image that the developers of Apache Kafka have published in Docker Hub so we can all use it. Okay? Remember the images that we created last time and we pushed into Docker Hub? Apache, the creators of Apache Kafka, Confluent, they also have their own image of Kafka that they push so that everyone can install Kafka through Docker. Then we will have a host name, and the host name is going to be broker. And then we will have another thing called container name, which is also going to be broker. And then ports. Here is where we are going to be mapping the ports of Apache Kafka. So Apache Kafka default ports will be 1992 and then 9101. This is a different port that is used to run Apache Kafka. I'm not sure why they have this second port. I think it's because they have removed, so Apache Kafka used to come in two different components, the broker and Zookeeper. But because they have removed Zookeeper in the last version, I think they have a different port inside Apache Kafka to run all the things that Zookeeper used to do, which was managing all the different brokers and so on. It doesn't matter at this point, but that's the reason. And then I'm going to copy a whole lot of environment variables here. So I'm going to say here environment. So environment is where we put all the environment variables for our container. So we're saying, okay, this is the node ID of this broker, because Kafka is a multi-node. It's distributed message broker, right? So you can have multiple instances that will share some information between themselves. Then we have to declare different protocols and different ports in which we are going to be listening for new messages. And so there's a lot of configuration here for Apache Kafka that we'll have to put. And so once we have all this configuration ready, and it's not important for a tutorial really, but it's configuration that is required. And now we're going to declare a new service. So we declare at the same level of broker. You see, I have IntelliJ telling me this is in the same level. So I'm going to call a new service called MySQL. And this is going to have an image. All right. So where is this? So I'm going to write image here. And the image is MySQL. And the version is 8.0.32. Okay. Then I'm going to say container name MySQL and environment. For MySQL, I'm going to call MySQL root password, so that I can tell MySQL what will be my root password. Just going to copy it just in case I misspell anything. And I'm going to call this root. And then ports. And we're going to do again the port mapping for MySQL is 3306. And we're going to map it to the same port in our local environment. And I'm going to add something called a volume. A volume is disk that MySQL will be, this container will be able to access. So in this case, I'm going to let this file, this container access some of the files in our environment. So if you see, I have a folder called files here, right? So because I have that folder, and inside that folder I have some folder called MySQL, and then I'm going to put this Docker entry point. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to explain what it does. So this is going to be this folder contains a file which tells MySQL how to initialize the database. So I'm going to be creating in a database a schema, and then I'll have transactions, and I'll have an account balance as well, and then I'll insert an account balance for a particular account. So I'll have all this, and this is going to be picked up by Docker Compose, and it's going to run this as an entry point. It's the init database script that this image has. So that's why I can do this. All right. So now what happens if I run this? I'm going to run it from here, but I'm going to show you also a different way you can run it. It says Docker is not connected. Let me see if maybe I don't have Docker. Let's see. Maybe Docker is not running, so I'm going to start Docker. Applications. Docker. All right. So I'm starting Docker on the side. And we'll have to wait for a few seconds. But if you have some questions, this is a good moment to ask, because we had to wait a little bit. So, any questions so far? Were you able to download the code and so on? I think Docker has started, so I can run from a command line. So I can go to a terminal, and I can say Docker compose. So if you see, I'm standing on the root folder, so I'm here, and we have the Docker compose file here. So I can say Docker compose up, and it will detect that I have a Docker compose file here, and it will start all those containers on its own. You see? So it started Kafka, it started MySQL. So now if I go here at different terminal, and I say Docker container ls, we can see that I have two containers running. One is Kafka, and one is a MySQL. It has these names, and it has the port mappings as well. So everything is running very simply, right? So now what do we do? Now what I will do is I'm going to be running the Spring Boot application now. So I'm going to go to my Spring Boot application, and it has a main method, right? So I'm going to run it. And we'll wait a bit here. And it's taking a while. I'm a bit scared of running all this. It's taking a while. I think it's... All right, so it seems like everything has started properly. All right. I hope this doesn't mess with the stream. Okay. So, there's a question there. So in Docker Compose, I can create 2 more containers at the same time, right? Yep. You can create 2 or more even. I'll show a different example where we can create multiple. All right, so we have the application running. So now I have a transaction producer, which is a different application that I'm going to use to create transactions in the Kafka topic. But before that, let me just, where is the, I'm going to go here. And so, okay, let's go here. And I'm going to be creating here localhost, sorry, not creating, 8080 account. So we have this account number and transactions, right? So there's no transactions. And if I go account balance, we have an account balance of 1,000 GBP. All right. So now I want to process a transaction. So I'm going to send through Kafka. I'm going to be sending a transaction here with this transaction producer. This is going to insert this transaction here. I'm going to insert it into Kafka with a Kafka producer. You don't have to know how this works, but it basically inserts a transaction into Kafka, and then our application is going to read it because it has a Kafka listener. So running this, and it run. So now I should be able to see, for example, in the database, if I go to the database here, I have the database connected as well. So I can read the account balance table. Okay, so you see now the account balance table has been updated. And it was updated right now. And now I have 1,010 GBP. And the transactions table, now it has 1 transaction. So if I go to the browser, this is also reflected here. And if I go to transactions here as well, you see, everything is working. So now I'm going to add different transactions just to test. So for example, I can modify this one and say 100, and then I can add another one because this is a list, so I can add more transactions. And this transaction is going to have maybe it's going to be 200. Okay, so I'll run this transaction producer again. And okay, everything has run. So if I go to the account balance, now it has been updated again. And if I go here, I should have 3 transactions, which I see. And I will also check the balance. And the balance also has changed here. I can also try with a transaction producer, maybe try a transaction that will be negative. I will leave this maybe one more for 10, and then I will say withdrawal. How do I write this? Just a second. So the listener here, process transaction, withdrawal. Right, so I'll change the type here to withdrawal, and it would be nice to have an enum and a numerator here, or a constant. This is way better than having this. So this needs refactoring, definitely. And I could say withdrawal, so it will subtract. Let's say it's going to subtract 50. So I'm going to send these 2 transactions. And let's see. Is there any other questions? What's the difference between create a MySQL image and a Kafka image separate each other with Docker Compose? So what I said is that I do it like that so that I don't have to install it myself. And I can, for example, if I want to change the version of MySQL, I'll just go to the Docker Compose file, change that, and that's it. I don't have to go install a different version. Then maybe I'll have conflicts between different versions. That's the great thing about Docker Compose. There's someone saying, I started my project with H2 and a file called data initializer. How can I change to MySQL and then create a Docker container? I mean, it's not necessarily bad that you have used H2. It's a good idea for a local environment as well. But if you want to change it to MySQL, you just need to change some of the configuration in your application. For example, here in application properties, you'll have all the different things you need to configure it for MySQL. You will have to put this, the data source URL, the password and user, and the driver, MySQL driver. And you will have to add the MySQL driver also in your POM file here. Those are some of the steps. All right. So we run the producer again. So if I go here, the balance should have changed. So now we have a different balance because it was an addition of 10 and then a subtraction of 50. So, and then if I go to transactions, I will see all the different transactions. We'll have the withdrawal. We'll have the different deposits. So everything is working as we wanted. There's a question. What type of encryption would be used to make the transaction secure? Well, that depends on where the transaction is coming from, and so you will need to encrypt, not just encrypt, but yeah, encrypt, and also add authentication and authorization to Kafka. So that's a whole topic in itself. So I cannot go into a lot of details, but with Docker Compose you can configure the type of security you want to have in Kafka, right? You can have certificate authentication, and then you can also have a lot of different rules on which application will be able to access which topic and so on. So it's a very complex and elaborate topic which goes out of the scope of this presentation, but it's a good question and it's a very interesting topic nonetheless. All right. So now that we are able to do this, you can see if I wanted to change the MySQL version, I can just go here and change it, and then restart the Docker compose, and it will take that change. And the same with Kafka. So and if I stop my MySQL, even if I stop the Docker container, then I don't have Kafka anymore, and I don't have MySQL anymore in my local. I just have Docker. That is the beauty of all this, is that we can test things that we don't have installed in our local. So that's why I like it a lot for this kind of development, for local development. I don't really use it that much for deploying in the cloud and so on, because we have even more advanced tools to deploy in the cloud, like Kubernetes. But are there any other questions regarding Docker Compose and how to use it? I'm going to show you now a different example of Docker Compose. But before that, I'm going to stop this. Let's just stop the Spring Boot application. And let's also stop in here. I'm going to stop the containers. So the containers were running. So now they are stopped, and I can say Docker compose down, and this will eliminate the containers, because now they're just stopped. And this removed all the containers, and that now we're good. Now if I go here, I see Docker container ls, there's nothing. Okay? Fine. So now I'm going to show you a different example. And in this example, where is this? I'll open this example for you in here. I think it's this one. And I'll show you this Docker Compose. All right. So here we have a Docker Compose, which is more complex than the one that we just saw. This one has Kafka, and then it has something called Kafka Connect, which is a tool used to extract data from databases and put it into Kafka, and also to put data from Kafka into other databases. Then we have another component called KSQLDB, and KSQLDB is used to transform data that is inside of Kafka. You can transform it and put it again inside of Kafka. Then we have another component that is used to be able to access KSQLDB as a console for KSQLDB. So I don't even have to install the console. I can install it with Docker Compose. And finally, MySQL, because in this exercise, what I was doing is I'm taking data from Kafka. Sorry, I was taking the data from Kafka and from MySQL, put it into Kafka, and then process it. So if I were to run this, I can run it from the console, or I can just simply run it from here, because I have this IntelliJ version which allows me to do this. And it's running everything here. All right. So now that everything has run, so everything is running now. So we have the Kafka broker, we have Kafka Connect, we have KSQL DB, we have KSQL DB server, we have MySQL. So everything is running. And again, I have the database here, so I can access the database. So everything is running, and where is this? Sorry. I think MySQL has not started yet. Yeah, MySQL is starting yet. Right, so now it's working. So I can query MySQL. I can also, for example, I can connect to KSQL DB here. I can connect, where is this? Here. And I can run KSQL. Think my resources are limited at this point, so I'm going to have to stop this. So I'll just stop this. Okay. So I had to stop it because everything was going to crash otherwise. But let's just go back to our Spring Boot thing. All right. So as I told you, with Docker Compose, you can do so many things. I could even add a second MySQL database here. Maybe if I need to access a different database, I can just say MySQL 2 and say image and all same things that I put here. I can have a Redis image, a Redis container for caching data. So I can have Redis here and so on. So the potential of Docker Compose is just immense, and I would really recommend that you download this and start playing with this code and see what other things you can connect with Docker Compose. Like, for example, I would start with maybe Redis, or maybe you can try adding maybe RabbitMQ, changing Kafka for RabbitMQ. You can try so many things, but that's really all that I have for today. I think it's been a great session. for learning and having an introduction to Docker Compose. It has been a great 2 sessions about Docker. So now you understand the main Docker concepts like containers, images, repositories, and so on. And also you have all the basic knowledge about Docker Compose, so that you can start using it in your project with in your local environment. If you need to run an application that you know it uses MySQL and you had to always install it, or you had, for example, you had to change MySQL for Postgres because the project changed the database, you can do that change immediately almost. You just remove MySQL from the Docker Compose and add Postgres to the Docker Compose. So it's really really amazing for you to try this and to play with it and so on and so on. And so if you like this and you want to learn more about Global Careers, you can scan the QR here in the in the presentation. You can learn more about how you can apply for different positions in Globant, and you will be you will be able to work with people with a lot of experience, people who really know their stuff, who have been working for ages in the IT and software environment. And so that's really all that I have for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. I can ask it. I can answer questions now. But if there are no questions, then let's see. Do you have the repository of the example? Yeah, I do have the repository. I think I already shared that with you, right? And the example with the example with I'm going to send you another repository that I have, the example that I have with Kafka, KSQL DB, and all that. So if you wanna learn about that as well. So the example for KSQL DB is here. Let me just paste it here in the window in the chat. It's not allowing me to. There. Sorry, that is one, and then there is another one. The one for KSQL. Let me just look for that one. Just a second. Where is it? Here. So I'm going to paste this one now. No, not this one. Why? It's not copied. Now it should work. Yeah, there it goes. So so yeah, in that tutorial, in the last one that I pasted, I used Docker Compose to run a full example of KSQL and Kafka and MySQL all together combined to process events of a football match. So that's a really cool tutorial. So you can try that one out as well. and it's going to be very, very nice. Hi, where are you placing the URLs? Are you're not able to see my comments on the chat? I'm programming with Mati in the chat. Do you see them? If you don't, please tell me. You were you able to? You didn't see it. Oh wow. So I was pasting things and you never saw it? No, that's really odd. Let me see if I can do it again. Oh wow. I honestly didn't know that it wasn't working. Something's going on today with my internet or my laptop. So I honestly apologize for that. Um, oh, wow. So yeah, my laptop is not working fine now. Did you get my comment now? Oh no. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, I'm not able to share. I'm going to share with the Globan team to see if they can share it. But just... Oh, wow. The worst thing is that it's showing me that I am sharing the... So in my... I see it as sharing, so that's why I thought all the time I was actually sharing this. I'm sorry, I honestly apologize for all that. So, and today's example I'm going to share with you now as well. It's the one called Spring Docker Compose. Yeah. And now I'm sharing the second one. Yeah, it should be now there. So what a shame, guys. I don't know why it wasn't working. But yeah, I don't know if there is anything else. Any other questions? Anything that you want to ask about Docker or Docker Compose? I don't see any questions. So if there are no more questions, guys, I'm going to be closing the stream for today. It was a great session. It was nice to be with all of you, and I hope you appreciated Docker and Docker Compose. And I'll be seeing you in the next edition of the Java Code Camp. And we have a lot of different subjects that we want to talk about and speak about with you. Kafka is one of them, and there are other things as well that we can discuss together. So I'll be so always subscribe to Globan's channel, subscribe to my channel, subscribe, and always pay attention to LinkedIn and news in Globan's social media, because there will be new editions of the Java Code Camp. And and you can always reach to me on LinkedIn or in my YouTube channel. So I'm very happy to share with you today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.